What up, all my fellow crafty peeps? Hi, my name is Judy, and if you haven't been to my channel before, I do sewing DIYs and sewing tutorials, and I sew pretty much whatever I feel like making that week. So for this week's video, it's not necessarily a tutorial because I did buy the pattern for this off of Etsy, which I will link down below in the description box. But I'm going to show you guys how I made this super cute little baby sundress out of some soft knit fabric that I made for one of my friend's daughter. And it's so cute. I loved making it. It was super easy to make, so let's go. I bought this pattern off of Etsy, and the first thing I did to make this sundress was to cut out the pattern pieces. I cut out 4 bodice pieces, 2 for the lining and 2 for the outer pieces, and I also cut out 2 skirt pieces. I pinned the bodice pieces together, right sides together. Then sewed the top part of each bodice set along the top part at 3/8 inch seam allowance, so starting at one armpit, going over the ties, and then back to the other armpit. I didn't sew down the sides yet though, for a reason which will pop up later in the video. I then trimmed around where I sewed on the tie parts to make it easier to turn it inside out. And then once I had both pieces turned right side out, I now had a front and a back bodice piece for this dress. The next part was kind of difficult for me to figure out what to do just based on what the written instructions for the pattern told me to do, but I eventually figured it out. I laid the piece out after opening it up with the ties in the middle. I did the same to the other piece and laid it on top of the first one, right sides together. I pinned them together and then sewed down the sides at a 3/8 inch seam allowance once again. Now to work on the skirt piece for the dress. I laid both pieces out and pinned them right sides together and sewed up the sides or down the sides at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. The next thing I did was hem the bottom part of the skirt. This was pretty difficult, again, because the pattern said to fold it up 1/2 centimeter and then fold it up another 1/2 centimeter and then sewed it down. Obviously, I haven't measured anything in centimeters since science class in school, so that's why I kept measuring it as I pinned to make sure I was doing it right and making sure it was even. I then sewed the hem as close to the edge of my fold as I could to make it look nice and fancy. After I finished the hem, I needed to gather the top of the skirt. I changed my thread length to as high as it would go and sewed 2 lines of threads at 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge. I just personally find it easier to gather fabric if I have 2 threads that I can pull. Then I gently pulled the threads until the waist was the same width as the bodice of the dress that I had already sewn. To sew the skirt piece onto the bodice, I matched up the raw edges and made sure that the right sides of the fabric were together. I once again sewed this at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, but I only sewed the skirt to the outer bodice of the dress. Don't sew to the inner bodice yet, because you're going to do that later. Also, if you're wondering where I kept messing with the bobbin, the thread kept snagging and getting caught up in the fabric, and I was trying to fix it. Okay, so now to finish the dress. I flipped the dress inside out and I pinned the inner bodice to the dress. I folded it over about 1 centimeter so that way you don't have a raw edge showing, and I pinned it in place. I made sure that the folded edge that just extended just past the seam that I just sewed to attach the skirt to the outer bodice, and you can see me doing that here. Okay, then to sew the inner bodice on. I wanted the dress to look as professional as possible, so I figured I would try to stitch in the ditch on the outside of the dress. But let me tell you now, stitch in the ditch sucks. I hated doing it so much, it was stressful. But I figured if I didn't do it now, I wouldn't ever get better at doing it, and it actually turned out better than I thought it would. It only turned out a little wonky in a couple spots, so I'm pretty happy with that. After that, I was pretty much done with the dress according to the pattern that I was following, but I decided I wanted to top stitch the top part down a bit, just especially on the ties to make them lie nice and flat and have a crisp look. So I top stitched down at an 1/8 inch seam allowance away from the edge around the entire top of the dress. And here is the finished dress with a matching headband that I made. I'm also planning on making some cute baby bloomers to go with it all as well. I just had to wait on the right elastic to come in from them that I ordered off at Amazon. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. If you're interested in making this sundress, like I did say, the link for the pattern that I bought from Etsy is in the description box. And it actually has the pattern sizing from newborn all the way up to, I think, 3 years old. So it's a pretty versatile pattern. It was like $4 or $5. It's super cheap. And it's super easy to follow along with. So if you were interested in making it, go buy that pattern. It's awesome. So hopefully you enjoyed watching me make this adorable little dress, and I hope you come back next week and make sure you like and subscribe to see what I'm going to come up with next. Bye!